Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are listening in from. I'm Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mind Valley, and welcome to my Honest Conversations. I have a very interesting guest today and a very interesting topic. And I have to tell you straight away, it's not the topic that I know much about, so it's going to be an exciting conversation for me. I'm glad about that. I know that a lot of people RSVP'd and were super interested in attending this conversation. So I know a lot of people are waiting with excitement, and I believe a lot of women particularly. And my guest today is Dr. Stephanie Estima. Welcome, Stephanie.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Kristina.
Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure. And I'll read out the bio because I'm not very good at memorizing people's details and not messing them up. So Dr. Stephanie Estima is a doctor and chiropractor with a special interest in metabolism, body composition, functional neurology, and female physiology. I have to say in this first sentence, there are so many
There's so many
complicated
long
words for
words.
me. Yes, which I kind of guess what they are about, and some of them are exciting and others are a little bit maybe scary, mostly because it's really not my area of expertise. So Stephanie has been featured on Thrive Global of the Huffington Post, has over 3.5 million article reads on Medium, and has helped thousands of women lose weight, regulate hormones, and get off medications with his signature program, the Estima diet. So welcome once again now officially. The topic we wanted to talk about is decoding female health. And as a woman and a mother and a person who has been through a lot of female stuff in a human's life, I get the idea that we are very different, but how different is it really, the approach to female health when it comes to diet, to exercise, to even to lifestyle? And I know it might be a redundant question, but still, a lot of the times we are a little bit non-gender specific. We do things the same way. We say that it works for everyone, but how important it is to actually have a separate approach, and then we'll dive deep into decoding female health.
Well, I'm so happy that you asked this question because I think that this is really top of mind in terms of what some of the new research and what some of the new literature that we're seeing is emerging around women's health and how we need to, as physicians, as healthcare providers, be tailoring our protocols to women. And I saw Tao in the chat say the Betty Body, and that's the name of the book. The name of my book is called The Betty Body, and in the book and what we're going to talk about today is why women are not little men. And to answer your question, it's such an easy oversight, right? Because we look at the literature, we look at the studies that have been done, and we say, okay, so they've done studies on fasting and they've shown all these great things. They see, growth hormone increases, weight loss, fertility, but when we actually peel apart some of the studies that have been done, it's mainly been done on men. And this has actually been throughout women's health and our history. We've often been excluded from studies because our menstrual cycle has been considered, and I'm using air quotes here if you're listening to this just on audio, like as a confounding variable, meaning that it would impact the results too much, that women have often been excluded from research inquiry. So the short answer is women are distinct. We have a different hormonal landscape that will govern our mood, our metabolism, our sleep, our libido, our reproductive system, our immune system. And the more that women can understand themselves, the more that we can understand how we change, not just when you have a menstrual cycle, because it's important to understand your reproductive cycle, but as you move from your menstruating years into menopause, what that hormonal shift might look like. And then how we need to adapt some of our, you mentioned diet and exercise, like how we can begin to adapt some of these protocols for a menopausal woman, for a perimenopausal woman, a woman who's just about to transfer or transition into menopause. So it is very important for us as women to understand ourselves as distinct and unique. We're not like smaller men with, pesky hormones. We're unique and beautiful in our own right.
I really like that we're talking about that, although I have to admit that it doesn't happen very often that I talk about menstrual cycles or or menopause. I have talked about deliveries and pregnancies. That's a little easier topic. Where I'm leading to is this. Oftentimes we are told that it's okay, it works for women as well. And you just said that women have been excluded out of a lot of studies because menstrual cycles are such an important factor which changes so much, which is in a way unfair and interesting. As I said, it's not my area of expertise, maybe because I've had 2 children and I've had so much experimenting with my body naturally that I'm not too keen on trying all the new biohacks, although I consider myself quite healthy and quite up to date. But I remember it was about 10 years ago that I went on a cleansing fast with Vishen. We were married then. And we did this interesting, it was long enough time ago that I don't remember the particulars, but we were on a specific diet and we were taking some supplements to detox our body. And it was an interesting experiment, not so much physically as it was emotionally and psychologically. But what I remember at the end of this experiment was that when I was allowed to start eating things, I got up out of bed one morning and I fell back in. And I just couldn't move. And for 2 days, I was lying flat in the bed. And then when I got the strength, my driver brought me to my doctor. And I said, I've been on this fast. And then I just been in bed for 2 days, and he started asking questions. It turned out that I had this days right before that, and he explained to me that you're a woman, it works different for you. So you flushed your system, and then nature flushed your system. Then not surprising that you lost everything. So how? On one side, there are these objective differences. On the other side, there's the stigma and taboo around the topic, because I'm not comfortable talking about menstruation because we don't talk about that. In fact, I was buying the supplies today in the shop, in the drugstore, and I realized that at 43, having been in psychology and personal growth and transformation for 18 years, I still feel awkward admitting that I'm a woman who occasionally bleeds. So how do we break through that? Do we have to break through it? Where the conversation starts and how much that really affects us actually in our daily choices? Sorry, it's a huge loaded question.
It's a huge question, but it's such an important one. I think that so many women, there's a lot of shame that we have around our fertility, around we're never taught how our fertility actually works. Like maybe we're lucky in high school, we get the sex ed, and then they teach you how to put a condom on a banana or something, right? Like that's like the extent of it. But we don't really understand the ebbs and flows when we're fertile, when we're not. And to your point, you go into the grocery store, or even, if you're in the office, you don't walk around with like your tampon in your hand saying like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom and change. Like, maybe part of that is a little bit of, cultural, sensitivity and being discreet and whatnot, but we're really taught that our period is this like almost cleanse, kind of this dirty time, and we have to really sort of hide it from the world. And there's a lot of unfortunate, I remember when I was in high school, the absolute worst thing, if you ask me, what is the worst thing that can happen to you? It's like getting my period and, bleeding through my jeans or something so that there's like a spot on the back of my pants. So I think that what I would like to do in, over the span of my career, certainly with this conversation, is to empower women, to educate them, and of course the men who love them and everyone in between, right? So we want to understand the biology and the physiology of our cycles. And then we want to start having these conversations with our young girls, because I think that shame, and that if we don't have this open dialogue with our girls around what your period and what your menstrual cycle is, what is normal and what is not. If you yourself don't know as a parent, what is normal and what is not, you certainly can't pass that information on to your children. And then when we think about interventions like the pill, like having informed conversations with our healthcare providers around the risks and benefits, like all of these knock-on effects happen when we start to understand and remove the shame around it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're mammals. This is what we do. Like, we are the reason why women are, of course, men have a play, men are the seed, women are the soil, right? But we are the reason why the human race is still here, is everybody has a mother, right? So I think we really need to get familiar with our hormonal landscape, how it changes over the arc of our life. So when we're, before we get our periods, having these conversations with our young girls, when we first get our periods, because, if anyone listening here has ever had teenage girls, like, it's not like you don't just get up and learn how to ride a tricycle or, a bike, like there's falls, right? And the same thing is true with menstruation. Like, we have these sort of, rough starts sometimes to when in those early years of menstruating. And then, 20s and 30s is kind of, same. And then as we move into our 40s, is perimenopausal time, we start to notice changes in the rhythmicity of our periods. And then, of course, into menopause. So I think the more that we can understand the way that we change over the course of our life, the better we can begin to remove the shame, begin to understand our fertility, and then begin to empower the next generation as well.
So it's in the contemporary society, it's still the task and obligation of every woman to research that, or is there any kind of open dialogue going on about that, where you can join in and listen and see where the decoding of the female health starts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can listen to practitioners like myself. There's lots of great practitioners who are now beginning to really remove the stigma and talk about women's health in an open, honest, transparent dialogue. And I'd be happy to talk about that with your listeners today in terms of what happens in during what a normal menstrual cycle for a menstruating woman looks like. What are some of the changes that we see as we move towards menopause? I think that that's really, really important. Yeah.
I think it would be super interesting. I would be interested in listening to that, and also in how does this within one cycle, is there anything that we should consider throughout, just in the everyday life, let's say, depending on where you are in the cycle, how is it going to affect you? Are you going to even my basic question that I started with, that I did a detox at a very odd timing, where I ended up in the wrong time for me, and I ended up in bed instead. So how is the normal menstrual cycle, and how do you live with that? How do you adjust or adapt to that? And I'm asking that at 43. I'm feeling almost ashamed.
And I think it's so courageous of you to be asking it. And, I'm at 43, at 53, at 83, like that, you're asking the question means that you are open to learning. And that's really that's really why we're all here, right? I mean, you said yourself, you're a self-proclaimed, like really into self-actualization and learning and development. And I think that this is just another layer as we think about how we can up-level ourselves and move towards self-actualization. So let's do like a menstruation 101, and then we can talk about the perimenopausal and menopausal considerations as well. So typically when we think about a normal menstrual cycle, it is, there's a range. So we typically will say, you'll hear usually 28 days. That's normally what you'll hear, 28 days, but there's actually a range. If you're a 27-day girl, if you're a 32-day girl, that's all fine. Normally the range is about 26 days, all the way up to about 33 days. So as long as you're sort of in that range, that would be considered a normal cycle. The best way that you can know if you don't know how long your cycle is to track it. So there's a lot of free apps that you can use there's lots of different ways that I use an app because I'm on my phone a lot. So it's just easy for me to track. You can also do things like basal body temperature, cycle charting, fertility awareness method. There's a lot of different ways, but for most people who are just starting, an app is really easy. So the one that I use is called Clue, and I have no affiliation with them. It's just the product that I use. It's spelled CLUE, and it's really great. You can you put when you start bleeding, it has little areas for you to put in, like what your body temperature is if you're tracking that, what your cervical mucus might look like, because that also changes through the month. If you're feeling hot, sleep disturbances, what your libido is like, did you have all these different things. So first, we want to be tracking. That's number one. And when we look at the cycle as a whole, there's sort of two main phases. So there's like the first 2 weeks roughly, and then the second 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks, usually is referred to as the follicular phase. And the reason why it's called the follicular phase is because this is all about developing the follicle. So the follicle is like this beautiful, if you think about like an oyster, it has, and once the oyster opens up, you have this beautiful pearl inside. The pearl is the egg, right? So that's what the follicular phase is all about, having this, developing this follicle to develop that oyster, that egg inside. Because the actual point, I mean, we all think about our periods, like the bleed week when we're bleeding and stuff, which of course happens. But the point of your menstrual cycle is not to bleed. The point of your menstrual cycle is to ovulate, which is to release that oyster, release the pearl from the oyster, release the egg so that it can be fertilized. Whether or not you want babies, your reproductive system doesn't care about that. That's what it's programmed to do. So the first week of that follicular cycle is that bleed week. That is the week where most of us know when we're bleeding. So, for most women, we bleed anywhere from like 3 to 7 days. That's like a normal length of time. And when we look at some of the hormones that are present during that bleed week, everything is usually quite low. So we see estrogen is a little lower. We see progesterone, which we'll talk about, is not even around. Progesterone is really more of that second phase of the menstrual cycle. And then we see a lot of other hormones. Everything is generally low. First couple of days when you first start bleeding, women will, complain of like some cramping, maybe some sluggishness and energy, and that's completely normal. So that's the other thing. We really want to be careful when we're talking about the menstrual cycle. We want to be able to distinguish between what's normal and what's common, right? So this is another, I know that Mind-Valley has talked about there's been a lot of expert thought leaders in Mind-Valley over the years. And I think it's really worth talking about this idea of what's normal and common. Normal is normal. It's fine. It's okay. It's expected. Common is what happens to many people, but it's not necessarily normal. Right. So we want to be careful around, I get normal headaches around my period. I get normal cramp. I have to take normal Midol. It's like, that's not normal. It's common. And if you think of it as normal, it's not likely that you're going to seek out change to fix it because you think it's normal. Right. So common cramping day 1 or 2, like your uterus is contracting, like that's normal. But then you should kind of be able to get back into your regular sort of swing of things by, day 2 day 2 of your period. So we finish our bleed week, and then we have the second week. This is the week before we ovulate, the week before that, that pearl is released from the oyster. So here, when we look at our hormones, there's 2 very important things that happen. One is that we see your testosterone rise. And yes, women have testosterone. Men have a lot more of it, but we have testosterone too. And then we also see estrogen rising. So why this is important is testosterone is, first of all, a lot of women, if you've ever noticed your libido, you may have, this week you may have more interest in sex, and, you may be more flirty if you're with a partner. Like I always joke, I'm always, chasing my partner around the kitchen because this is the time where I feel like really, excited.
The nature nudges you on.
Exactly. So that's part of testosterone's role. It's involved in your libido. And it's also like Mother Nature, she's a smart, she's a wily minx, because if you are, feeling more sexy and having more sex around this time, it's very likely that, in the next couple of days when when that egg is released, that there's potential for fertilization. Testosterone is also really important for muscle mass, for bone density, mood, and feeling extroverted. So very, very important hormone. And then estrogen, as we mentioned, this is, typically we talk about this as the female, hormone. It's the thing that gives us our hips and our breasts, and it puffs up our cheeks and puffs up our lips. And, we feel like super sexy and hourglassy and all of that. So this is really important. When we think about this we can talk about nutrition and exercise maybe in a moment, but what I want to highlight here is that with these two hormones rising, you are going to be promoting, you can be promoting that release of the pearl, of that egg from the follicle, and your behaviors are going to change, right? You're going to be more flirty, you're going to be more extroverted, you're going to be more talky. So when we think about this from just an everyday, what do I do in my ovulatory phase? This is a really great time to network, right? This is a great time because we're just chattier and we want to see people and we want to know, like, where are we going? What are we seeing? What are we doing? We're more naturally more extroverted during this time. So then we have ovulation, kind of middle of the cycle. I'll say 14, but it can be anywhere from like day 12 to 16, kind of depending on how long your cycle is. And then we move into the second 2 weeks of the cycle. So normally we were calling the first 2 weeks follicle or follicular phase. Now we're talking about the luteal phase. The egg is out of the follicle and we're waiting for it to be fertilized. And now we see in these next 2 weeks, if you are a woman who tends to get PMS. So if you tend to feel moody, you tend to have, digestive issues, your sleep is disturbed. This is the 2 weeks where you will very likely experience them. We tend to be more inflamed generally if that is what happens to you in these next 2 weeks. We typically see that. And then what we see is estrogen reaches, like in that second week, we see estrogen come up high and then she does like a nosedive and then she comes back up again and then she just stays there. So from a behavioral perspective, estrogen is for a woman's brain, estrogen really helps with our articulation. When we are speaking, this is a really great time, in these last 2 weeks to give a presentation, to be interviewed by Mind Valley, to do a podcast, like to give a presentation at work. These are really great, or to ask for a raise. Like this is a great time because you're able to pull more words and, to be able to pull yourself together in a much more succinct way. So that's what we sort of see in these last 2 weeks. And then particularly in that week right before your period, most women feel like tired, they feel sluggish. And then there's this period like 2 or 3 days before we get the period where, I like my boyfriend's bothering me or my husband's bothering me or my partner is bothering me. My career, like my boss is getting on my nerves. My kids, everything's wrong. Like I can't even choose the right nail polish this week. And usually why that's happening. And we all say, oh, it's PMS. Oh, it's like that time, it's like that time I'm about to get my period. But I actually would love to reframe that for most women. This is what we call a negativity bias. So everything is wrong. Your parenting is wrong. Your partner is wrong. Your boss is wrong. Your whatever is wrong. Whatever is coming up for you in those 2 to 4 days before you actually start bleeding, before you get your period, this is your body's way of saying to you, hey, these are the things that are not working in your life right now. Maybe it's your relationship with your partner or your parenting or your relationship with your child or the career path or the relationship you have with your coworkers or what have you. And it's a time for self-reflection. Like what are the things that I need to change in the next cycle, in the next month, that are going to help propel me forward to where I want to go. So I really want to reframe that because everyone's like, oh, PMS, like, oh, she's just moody. And it's like, well, yes, but emotions are a very powerful signal. They're a very powerful teacher. And if we ignore our emotions, which are a gift, sometimes your symptoms are a gift from your body. It's your body's way of saying, hey, girl, like I'm here. I need you to pay attention to me. This would be an important time for you to pay attention to what's coming up for you and to journal on it, think about how you're going to solve these problems in the next week on your period as well. So that's sort of like, the period, the menstrual cycle in a nutshell.
That's actually such a nice way of saying it, the menstrual cycle in a nutshell. But I want to thank you personally for reframing this last bit, because I believe that we, being civilized humans, can actually take the circumstances and use them, if that's the right way of expressing that. So thank you for reframing it into an opportunity to actually introspect, to think about your life, to maybe journal, and to pay attention to your emotions. Because as a feminist, I have really, for me, this, oh, she's just PMS, or oh, she's just, it's such a red flag for me. Not red flag, like, you know, like for the bull, the red cloth. I really think that we should. That it's a shame that we dismiss things which is such a natural part of our biology, dismiss them as something useless, as something illogical, as something maybe irrational, crazy, whatnot. So thank you personally for reframing it, because it's a beautiful message to use those days, which is negativity bias days, for your advantage, and not to write them off as something unpleasant and useless, because it is not, obviously. But coming back to the cycle, how do you adjust your lifestyle? Because you were suggesting that this is better done in this cycle, in this period of the cycle, this is better done here. Obviously, not everything can be fit to that. Sometimes you have a speech whenever you have a speech, and no matter where you are in your cycle. But how can you adjust things which depend on you, whether it's exercise, dieting, or nutrition, or taking a break, a retreat, or sleep in? How do you time that within the cycle?
It's a great question. And this is actually a lot of what I write about in the book, in the Betty Body. I'll give you sort of an overview, always with the eye that, personalizing this to the individual is always best. But as women, we generally flow through these hormonal milieus. So we can always adapt our behaviors, whether it's what we're eating and the macronutrient composition of the diet, or the caloric intake of the diet, whether it's the type of exercises that we're engaging in. So we'll start with exercise first, and then we'll talk about nutrition. So when we talk about exercise through the cycle, there's a couple of really important pieces of the cycle that I want to highlight. First, I'll say, as an overarching view, I'm a really big fan of resistance training in general through the cycle for women. It's just how you train. So whether it is heavy weights, whether it's circuit training, that's the things that are going to change through each week, depending on where you are in your cycle. So for example, in your bleed week, most women, as I mentioned, first day or two, everyone, there's a tendency for women to just skip their workouts because they don't feel like it. And if that's you, all the power to you. Go for a walk, spend some time in nature, some gentle, those first 2 days, I like to engage in what's called NEAT, NEAT. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is a long, fancy word. All it means is you're moving more.
But is it okay to exercise? Because I'm the opposite. I actually, it's strange, but I noticed that, especially with bloating and everything, when I move, it kind of relieves the pain and it feels better. Yeah. So I'm more of the person who would actually do exercise during that period. But I'm also noticing that, let's say, if I do 10x, then I can't do the same weight or the same amount. Like my strength is not there. Is it normal, or is it just common?
No, it's so I like to train through my period. So a lot of women, once they've gone through my protocols, actually don't like, getting their period is like any other day in the month. Like there's not a lot of pain, and they're not needing to take medications and all of that. But if you're just starting out, so I also want to, give a continuum for women, because the one thing that I find what we do really well is we blame ourselves for everything. So if I'm saying something and they're like, oh my God, I can't do that, there's something wrong with me. So I want to give the women who are listening permission to sort of do what they feel along a continuum. So if you feel like really crummy the first day or two, you can take the days off. That's absolutely fine. What I would counsel you to do is to go for long walks, is to do some stretching. Something where you're moving your body gently, you're getting that circulatory flow, but there's not a requirement if you don't feel like it to lift weights. Now, I like to lift weights. I can lift weights the day I get my period. Like I can, because I've just been doing this for so long. But as you get better, as you heal that sort of hormonal balance, you'll find that actually, working out on your period is great. What I do recommend for those of us, maybe 1 day or 2 days passes, you're ready to hit the weights again, is I love to counsel women to do a moderate weight style. So that might be 3 or 4 sets of, whatever exercise. And then you're doing somewhere between 8 and 12 repetitions of a moderate weight. Now,
so you don't push yourself on those days generally.
well, I'm lifting a moderate weight, which means that, let's say by rep number 10, I still have perfect form, but I'm really struggling. Like it's heavy at that point. I'm ready to put the weights down. And that number might be different for me and you. Like, I did arms.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. So I was doing, back and biceps this morning, and, I was doing, my biceps were, I think it was 17 and a half. And then I was doing whatever I was doing so 17 and a half might be good for my biceps. And then for you might be able to do 20 or 25, like, whatever. So we just want to be thinking about what is right for us in that rep range, in that 10, 8 to 12 rep range. In the second week, and then I'll also say all types of cardio are great in your bleed week. So you can do high intensity interval training, steady state cardio, which is where you're kind of doing the same intensity all the way through. Those are great in week 1. In week 2, it actually flips. So now, as I mentioned before, I was saying we have that estrogen comes up, we have testosterone coming up. One of the things that we need to know as women around estrogen's effect on our ligaments and our tendons is that estrogen makes our ligaments loose. So it kind of makes the term is called laxity, right? But they become like loosey-goosey. So if you're doing a lot of HIIT training this week, you're very likely going to injure yourself, because we actually see this in the literature where athletes that do a lot of explosive power in the second week, this pre-ovulatory week, they tend to injure their knees. So the ligaments called the ACL joint. And we tend to pull our ligaments apart. You're setting yourself up for injury. So this week 2, I like to tell women, stay away from the HIIT training, do your steady state cardio, right? So you're building up your cardiovascular reserves, your pulmonary function, your mitochondria, like you're still getting the cardiovascular benefit. You're just not doing the explosive types of movements like the sprinting or the Peloton crazy stuff, or you're not doing burpees and any of that. For weights, because your testosterone is peaking, we want to take advantage of that as women, especially women if you're a 40-year-old woman, 50-year-old woman, 60-year-old woman, or, maybe at 60, you've gone through menopause, but 40s and, early 50s, if you haven't transitioned yet into menopause, you want to take advantage of that increased testosterone. You want to lift heavy weights. So I said week 1, we do moderate weights, right? 8 to 12 reps. In this week, I like the weights to be a lot heavier. So the rep range might be 5 to 8, right? So you're gonna pump up that weight by like 20%, exactly, like 20%, 30%, even 40%. You're going to replicate almost your 1 rep maximum. So heavy weights in week 2, and then steady state cardio, stay away from the HIIT. When we move into week 3 and week 4, I typically will bring the woman back in week 3, because we see estrogen comes down, right? And then she comes back up again. So you can begin to do that HIIT training again in that 3rd week. But I always like to tell my ladies, especially my type A personalities that are listening, 1 HIIT training a week maximum. Like I have had so many women come to me and they're like, I'm doing like 5 Peloton classes a week and I don't know why I can't lose weight. And it's like, I'm not throwing shade on Peloton. It's a great company. And, if you're working out and you feel great, awesome. But you can't always be doing HIIT training as a woman as well. I go through this in the Betty Body, the book, around why when you're constantly sending this stress signal, like this high, like you're running away from a tiger, you're doing this like burst training 5 days a week, your body's like, what are we about to die? Like it will shut down your reproductive system, your immune system, your digestive system, and you will begin to accumulate fat almost as an insurance policy. So once a week for the HIIT, and then you can return to that moderate weight rep range in week 3 again. And then in week 4, a lot of us feel kind of, we feel like, it's like that negativity bias is coming. Maybe we feel a little inflamed. So I still like you to train, but I like the weights to get lighter. So you're doing a higher rep. So now you're doing 15 to 20 reps of a lighter weight. And when you do that, you're still contracting, concentric and eccentrically contracting the muscles. So every time your muscles contract, there's a compound called a myokine, which is an anti-inflammatory agent. So the more that you kind of do that, right? So when you bring a lighter weight, but you're doing 15 times on the biceps, then whatever it is, 15 times on the triceps, you're gonna have this overall anti-inflammatory effect, which will also help with those feelings of bloating and feelings of moodiness and feelings of it will help to ameliorate that as well. And you can do HIIT training and steady state in this week too.
I'm realizing that there is such a wealth of wisdom in you that I might want to bring you on again, or maybe in some other shape or form, because I would probably spend a day discussing about that. So I'm going to ask the next question, but I want to also give a chance to people who have left questions here in Q&A. Oh. So Bianca, if you could be bringing up someone while I'm asking the next question, because we talked about exercise, but you also mentioned you will go through the cycle in terms of nutrition, and then after nutrition, maybe Bianca will bring in some of our guests to ask a question directly of Stephanie.
Absolutely. So for the nutrition piece, and when I talk about nutrition, I like to talk about the foods that we're eating, and then when we're engaging in fasting, because that's also a nutritive tool as well, right? So when we think back to those first 2 weeks and second 2 weeks, we said follicular phase and then luteal phase, right? So the first 2 weeks of bleed week and pre-ovulatory week. Generally, when it comes to fasting as women, and even if you were to restrict your calories or to restrict, if you're going to do a ketogenic diet where you're restricting your carbohydrates, any type of restriction is great in these 2 weeks. Generally, it's much easier for us. We're much more resilient to it. In the luteal phase, in those 2 weeks prior to the onset of your period, you can still fast, but it's not the water fasting that we typically will talk about, or that, is typically discussed. Like most people, when they say fast, they think like, I'm not having any food. So I actually, in the book, I talk about different ways that we can fast. So type of fast is what we're talking about here. Length of fast is something that you might, variable that you can play with. And then the frequency of your fast. So, and my opinions around fasting have actually softened quite a bit from when I first was into, I was looking at the Mark Sissons and the Dom D'Agostinos and the Peter Attias, all men who I completely admire, love, but they're men, and they were doing like 7-day fasts and 5-day fasts. And then when I would try to do them, my period would be screwed up. Like the next month, I'd be like, why didn't I ovulate this month? So I like a water, if you're going to do any type of fasting, like a water fast, I generally will recommend that more in the follicular phase. If you still want to fast in the luteal phase, and depending on your hormonal composition, like we can talk about fibroids and endometriosis and PCOS, like there's all these different things that women deal with. I generally don't like water fasting in the second 2 weeks. It'll be a much gentler fast. Like maybe it's a bone broth fast, or maybe you're having maybe you're doing like more of a fasting mimetic, where you're not necessarily restricting. It's not so restrictive. And I think if there's one thing that you all take away from this message, is that I would love for women to be gentler with ourselves when it comes to our nutrition, our exercise, and just the way that we view our bodies in general. Like we're so hard on ourselves. And I get why, right? We live in this society that tells us that we have to stay young forever. We can't ever like have a gray hair. We can't ever have a wrinkle. We always have to look like a 20-year-old. So I've grown up in that society as well. So I understand where it comes from, but I don't want health to be so punitive. I don't want it to feel like we're always like mashing ourselves up against a wall. So that's yes, you wanted to say something.
No, I just wanted to say that it's so great that you're mentioning that. Of course, I would love to have a completely different conversation with you about the pressure that women have in the contemporary world, considering that we live in the society which is obsessed by youth. And I will say the word skinniness as well, because some of it is occasionally, I know there is an epidemic of overweight, but there is also the another extreme as well, which is also a burden on a lot of women. But we do have a guest here, so I'll have to pass my microphone to a guest. as many questions as I might be having, and as many things that I'd like to talk to you about. But I want to be fair to other guests here. So we have Oksana here, if I'm pronouncing the name properly.
Hi,
yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yes, great. So I'm passing the microphone to you. If you can have the camera on, it would be great. If not, it's okay as well. But I'm passing the microphone to you, and I'll mute myself, and you get to ask your questions.
Yeah, hello everyone. I asked the question about fasting. Actually, you already touched on it, but maybe you could elaborate on the health benefits for women related to intermittent fasting, and a little bit more about types of fast that you do every day. Like you fast for 16 hours and then eat for 8 hours, etc.
That's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked it.
Thank you.
So as it relates to, when we talk about fasting in the online space, we all hear what Oksana just mentioned, which is the 16-8, right? Is like what we want to do is we want to work ourselves up to being able to fast for 16 hours, and then we have an 8-hour eating window. And this is actually, I'm really glad that you brought this up, Oksana, because this is where I have softened around women. So when I first started fasting, I was saying, following all the gurus, and I was like, I need to do it just like them. And doing a 16-8 fast for a woman every single day of your cycle, I do not advocate for that anymore. I think that there are times like in that follicular phase, if you want to try the 16-8 for a couple days, see how that feels. You may even want to play with like a 24-hour fast, which is maybe you have a meal at dinner, and then you have your next meal at dinner the next day. But for the most part, I actually like a gentler fast for ladies. So I like either a 12-12, so 12 hours of eating, 12 hours of fasting. So that might sound like even crazy for me to be suggesting that for everyone that's been sort of marinated in this like 16-8 protocol. But what that means is that you might start eating at 7 a.m. You have your coffee, you have your, whatever. And then your last meal is at 7 p.m. So you'll go 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. with no food. The other step up from that would be a 10-14. So, you start eating at 7 in the morning, and then you stop eating at 5. So you have a 10-hour time period where you're eating, and then you have a 14-hour fast. And you'll find that as you start tracking your mood and your hunger, one of the things I didn't actually mention is in that luteal phase, we have a hormone called progesterone. And progesterone, pro-gestation, pro-pregnancy, that's our pro-pregnancy hormone, that will stimulate your appetite. One of the things why women are like, I could eat the entire grocery store, is part of it is because of under the influence of progesterone. So you might find in week 3 and week 4 of your cycle that 16-8 is too much. Even and especially the week before you bleed, especially in that 4th week, your body right now, if you think about what your body is doing, it is everything, all hands on deck. We have to create this endometrial lining. So if I were to, Oksana, in your 4th week, right before you got your period, if I were to do like a blood draw on you, let's say, I would find lowered levels of plasma glucose, lowered levels of plasma amino acids, free fatty acids, glutathione, vitamin D, zinc, selenium, the list of, all the things, because your body is literally throwing everything into this uterine lining. So I will say for women in, right before that week before their period, 12-12, and sometimes you don't even do that, right? Sometimes it's longer than that. And that's just what you need. I would also say in that week to increase your calories without guilt. Because so many of us are like, no, we have to eat less. We have to eat less. And we have to exercise more. And that cutting calories in that 4th week is just, you're asking for a disaster. You're asking for hormonal mayhem. So that's how I would change the fasting through the cycle. Like those first 2 weeks, you can try and you can play, right? The 16-8, maybe 24, if you want to do a couple day fast, if you're, maybe someone who has PCOS and that you don't have that conversion of testosterone, you're what we would call androgen excess, where you're not aromatizing the testosterone to estrogen properly. But in the second half of the cycle, gentle fasts. So extending the length, changing the type so that we're not just doing water fast. Like maybe you're having soup all day like that. It can be like, you can do a bone broth, or, you can make yourself wonderful vegetable soups where you're still taking in calories and you're still taking in proteins, but it's just more of a caloric restrictive model where you're still getting like food, but you're just eating less overall. So you want a type of fast, we want to talk about 16-8. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and other part of the question was, what are the health benefits actually that
the health benefits.
along with it? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about fasting in general, and this applies to men and women, generally, when you're fasting for women, I'll say in accordance with your menstrual cycle, or if you're menopausal, I saw a comment in here that I haven't gotten to yet, but it's around like the lunar cycle because we sort of follow the moon. I would say that generally it helps to improve insulin sensitization. So when you are not eating, you're restricting all of your macros, right? Like you're bringing down your carb intake, your protein intake, your fat intake. And with that, of course, you're reducing the blood glucose and the blood amino acids that are available. So that is going to drop your insulin, your circulating levels of insulin in the body, which will sensitize the cells to when you do eat a carbohydrate or when you do have protein. So, we know that when we have protein, there is an insulin spike, especially, and carbohydrates. When we have carbohydrates, that breaks down into glucose, and then the glucose will stimulate the insulin secretion from the pancreas. So that'll sensitize your cells to insulin. That's what one of the things that fasting does. It's in a way, it's a bit of a detox as well, right? You're giving your digestive system a rest. So for the women who are listening, or men or women who have digestive upset. So if you feel like you get distressed, if you have gassiness or bloating or, GI, we'll call it like distension, right? After you eat, allowing the gut to rest, allowing the endothelial lining, like the inner layer of the gut, allowing that to heal will also help with your digestive capacity, because it's not what you're not what you eat, you are what you absorb, right? So your capacity to extract nutrients from your food will be improved. There's a lot of reports actually that report a lot of mental clarity. So women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, if you are inflamed in any way, a lot of women will report this like brain fog. So it's like, it's like everything is kind of hazy. I don't know. I can't think, like, why did I walk into this room again? Where's my keys? Where's my phone? Like this sort of brain fogginess that we see. And fasting can really improve that via lowering systemic inflammation, lowering oxidative stress. That's another way that fasting works. So when we think about eating, it's a very energetically expensive endeavor, right? It's hard. It's like, it takes a lot of work for our bodies to take the food and assimilate it into the substrates that we need to create energy. So, and in doing that, there's oxidative stress. And when you have these sort of free radicals, if you're overloading the system with these reactive oxygen species or these free radicals, this can cause a whole bunch of things, from aging to glycation to all these like different things. So I would say that it improves oxidative stress, and it also helps your body clear out the stuff that it doesn't need. So there's a process called autophagy, which you may be familiar with, or if you don't, we can, if you're Greek, aptos means self and phagos means eat. So it literally means to eat the self. So autophagy is literally self-cleaning. You're getting rid of like old cells that are not working the way that they should, cellular debris, pieces of nucleotide, like stuff that you don't need, that just accumulates over time. It's kind of like wear and tear, right? So you have this wear and tear on the system. And then when you fast, you allow for this autophagy, this self-cleaning to take place. So those would be like the kind of the biggest health benefits. I will just caution and say that when women fast too aggressively, and I put this in the book, and there's like sort of a whole chapter on this, but when and there's been there's been rodent studies, so not human studies yet, but we have seen in rodents where they fast the female rats too aggressively, when they sort of looked at them afterwards, their ovaries shrank, their brains shrank, they had disturbed sleep patterns. So we really want to be careful as women, again, around fasting too aggressively, because it does absolutely affect our fertility. And I think, when we look at fertility, it's certainly for reproduction, but it's also for our own, it's a marker of health for women. To be fertile when you're in your reproductive years, we can look at some of these measures of your menstrual cycle as a marker for health.
Okay, thank you very much. Great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oksana, and thank you so much, Stephanie. I actually have to be very mindful of the time, because our Mind Valley stage is always event after event. I just wanted to thank you again, Stephanie, for another message, which I'm taking away from this conversation, is that we women really have to talk like women, and talk with women, and not maybe compare ourselves to men. Especially biohacking is such a male-dominated industry for a reason, but then also it means that there is not enough information for us women to go by. And if you need another excuse from a non-professional, from me, then I can tell you this: men are never going to experience pregnancy, delivery, and breastfeeding. And that is such a biological miracle that gives me so many excuses. Sometimes I'm like, you experiment. I've done such a transformation with my body, which is absolutely miraculous, absolutely insanely. It's really taught me to hear my body better. Another conversation I'd like to have with you, unfortunately, we're not going to have this time today, is it possible to learn to actually trust your own instinct, trust your own feelings, and hear them? And maybe a conversation I'd like to have with you is, how do we talk to our younger girls? I have a daughter who is not yet, who hasn't started yet menstruating. So when is it time to start talking about her, that she's a woman? So many questions are open. So, but we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to ask you guys, would you like to bring Stephanie back to Mind Valley? Please leave a comment. I certainly would. So if you support me in that request, maybe we'll pass it over to
I would love to come back. There's so many places that we can go and have this conversation. I would just love it. Yeah. And I see all the love in the chat. Thank you.
I knew that. So traditionally, I'm going to ask you guys, while you are at that, also to leave a heart for my wonderful guests. If you're going to watch it later in recording, leave it in the comments. Stephanie, just the last very important question. Those who fell in love with you, how can they keep in touch, learn more? You've mentioned the book. Maybe you have a program or a course, or I don't know, a coaching thing, whatever. Just tell us.
I think the book is a great place to start. So the book is called The Betty Body, A Geeky Goddess's Guide to Intuitive Eating, Balanced Hormones, and Transformative Sex, which we didn't get to talk about today, but maybe on a future
another topic, sex,
another topic, sex, right, for women. And so that would be a great place to start. Of course, I do have programs. I do have coaching programs. You can, if you want to learn more, you can go to hellobetty.club. So we have different fitness programs. I have a one main program where I'm coaching live with my Betties, with my women weekly. And we talk about a whole range we talk about sex. I just did a training on the pelvic floor, on glutes, on like all the things that we talk about the divine feminine and the interplay with the feminine and the masculine. We talk about hormones, all that. So things that are really interesting to me as a woman, but also conversations that I wish I had with my girlfriends, with my mother, with my aunts. Like I wish I had these conversations when I was younger. So it's my way of bringing this and taking the shame and the stigma away from, like, for example, the pelvic floor. Like so many moms were like, I can't jump anymore. I can't run after my kid. I'm like, we are going to talk about like toning up the pelvic floor. We're going to talk about that. So, which is like most women are embarrassed to talk about that, especially postpartum, right? Postpartum, the pelvic floor changes and a lot of things can happen. So anyway, so that you can find me at hellobetty.club. And if you want to say hi on social, I'm on Instagram. So you can find me at Dr. Stephanie Estima.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to get to know you and to listen to you. I hope we get to talk more. And thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you, Oksana, for asking your question. And I'm so sorry I didn't get to bring more people up. Maybe next time we'll ask for 2 hours for an interview. Then we'll get to talk more. And see you next week, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.